And it looks like we are live. I'm here with Rick Hale. Hey, Rick.
Hey, sorry, Gary. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry, like my brain is going at a million miles per hour right now because of some stuff that I have to do still today. Oh, there we go, Gary.
No, um, we're here to talk about Rick's stories in Lifeblood 2. Plus, we'll talk about vampires and who knows what else. We'll just see whatever happens. Now, one note I wanted to make. Sometimes the USB port in my PC will stop functioning and I'll lose the camera. If that happens, the chat will still stay open. You'll still stay live. You'll just have to wait for me to come back. I'll have to reboot and come back. But um, it's only happened once, I think, but just in case. So anyway, why don't we talk about your two stories in Lifeblood 2 to start off?
Okay.
Um, why don't you talk a little bit about what those are about and give people an idea of that?
Well, I've put so many stories in your books that,
Oh, you forgot which ones?
yeah, just I know what they're about. Just remind me which ones.
You've got the Vampires of Ireland, and you've also got the Second Death of Pietrotoma.
Ah, that- Pietrotoma. Pietrotoma. This is one of my favorite stories. Now, here's the thing about Pietrotoma. Yes, it happens in Transylvania, where in Romania or near Transylvania, where all great vampire stories come. Agreed? So,
Agreed.
okay, here's the thing about the second death of Peter Toma. You would think that this was something that happened, say 400 or 500 years ago. A bunch of uh, overly suspicious medieval peasants discovered this guy was coming back from the dead and, spreading disease and feeding people, feeding off
Yeah,
the villagers, family, and friends, right? Forget all that. What makes this story so amazing is that it happened in 2013.
wow.
Yeah, so this is a fairly recent thing. This, like I said, this did not happen in the Middle Ages. This happened during a time when the phone in your pocket knows what you're thinking before you even think. So of course, this is out in the very, very rural areas of um, Romania, but they still have internet access. So it's not like they're a bunch of superstitious peasants. So this is what happened. Peter Toma was an elderly man who passed away. As it's going to happen to all of us, whether or not we like it. It's only a matter of time. But a couple of days after dying, Peter Toma was visiting people in their dreams, and other people were saying that he was visiting them in their bedrooms and seen wandering the the streets of this village, feeding on people, spreading disease. So they get like basically this hunting party together, and they go out to where Peter Toma is buried, dig him up, and sure enough, he looks like he's brand new or just newly buried. He's still, kind of like red, kind of like a fleshy look to him. So he looks healthy, like he's still a living being. So they, proceed to cut off his head and burn his body, and everything just stops. Now, one of the things that does make this a very modern story, rather than the villagers going back to their huts or whatever, um and the monster is now dead. Well, rather than this happening, the law tracks the people down that did this and actually puts them on trial for what they did. I can't really remember off the top of my head if they were found guilty of it, but I think that they were found guilty, but were given some very lenient sentences. So it's one of those amazing stories because it's like this is something that happened within recent memory, um, within the last like decade. Like I said, you wouldn't think that something like this would still happen, but apparently it does. Apparently these old world superstitions are still very much alive and still very much new.
Wow, that's just crazy stuff.
I know. And and what's really great is like the vampire is one of those things that we don't really talk about too much in the paranormal field right now. I mean, it was still considered very much a part of it, maybe about 100 years ago. But nowadays it's like, we're all about evil spirits and we're all about demons and this kind of thing. But, vampires are still very much a part of pop culture and still very much a part of the supernatural. And a lot of these stories have been, part and parcel of um, basically every culture that has ever trod the face of this earth, going back all the way to the Lamashtu of ancient Babylon. And my second story that appears in the book is about vampires of Ireland. Now, I know that a lot of people they consider when you think supernatural creatures of Ireland, you don't really think vampires. You think leprechauns. And in my own family, being Irish American, we have our grandfather used to tell us that when he was a boy, a leprechaun stole his clothes. And this didn't just happen in Ireland. This was in Cincinnati, Ohio, just outside of Cincinnati. So, these things have followed us around the world. Or we think of the banshee, her cry of anguish as one of the as a member of an ancient family dies. So you don't really think too much of vampires, but there are many blood-sucking fiends that does appear uh, in the folklore and the mythology of Ireland. One of them is the Deir Agdu, and this means red bloodsucker in old Irish, old Celtic. And the story of the Deir Agdu originated with Strongbow's tree. And according to this story, a young woman was in love. She was the chieftain's daughter. She was in love with a man who was very much below her stature in life or status. And, she wanted nothing more than to be with him. So she tries to run off and be with him. Well, dad does not like what's going on because he's the chieftain of this part of Ireland, and his daughter is going to marry into nobility no matter what. So he does this, he kind of arranges this marriage with a man who is, 30 or 40 years older than her. And in the process of arranging this marriage, he has his daughter's lover murdered. He has him killed, which I guess was something that quite commonly happened back then. And so she winds up marrying this guy. He is abusive. He's horrible. He does all these horrible things. So she climbs to the top of their castle and then jumps to her death. Out of despair because her lover's been killed. She's been forced to marry this horrible man. So what else is there to do? Obviously, life isn't worth living anymore. So a couple of days later, she raises from the dead and becomes a Deir Agdul or a vampire. They didn't have the word vampire back then. That's kind of something that comes from Eastern Europe and Greece, excuse me. And so she basically goes on just like this bloody rampage and just murders her father, murders the man that she was forced to be married, and then drinks their blood. And she's able to return to the grave, and everything is, cool and copacetic, which is something which is a factor that really does appear in a lot of, not only vampiric folklore, but of, spirits and ghosts that, raising from the grave and to take vengeance upon those who have wronged you. That's always been.
Vengeful spirit.
What's that?
Vengeful spirit.
Vengeful spirit, right? It's even in parapsychology, they consider unfinished business or vengeance as being a reason behind a haunting. The real scientific wing of ghost hunting and paranormal research and investigation. The second story that comes to us from Ireland is of the Abertac. And the Abertac was just a sinister, evil, ghoulish nobleman who, he spent his entire days cruelly torturing the peasants of his realm. And so, one day he finally dies. Yay, he's dead. Everybody can go about their lives. He's got different plans. He raises from the grave and does his business where, now he's got all these supernatural powers and he's, feed on the blood of the innocent, mostly children and women. So they go to his grave. And here's another thing that really figures heavily into vampiric folklore. They fashion a stake of from a yew tree and drive it through his heart and pin him to the ground and then rebury him. So you have a lot of these, common threads, common themes that you find in a lot of vampiric folklore.
Yeah, the second story actually reminds me, it's not a vampire story, but have you seen the movie One Dark Night?
No, I haven't.
There's a guy who's sort of a really powerful psychic, kind of wizard cult leader, and he dies and then winds up reanimating and can reanimate all these dead. And it's crazy. And he actually sort of died intentionally so that he could have this power.
Right.
And so that sort of reminded me of that in a way. I wonder if they got some of their idea for that from that tale.
It's possible. Yeah, everybody always talks about how, Bram Stoker or Sheridan Le Fanu, who were, both writers of vampiric fiction from Ireland. A lot of people think, like with Bram Stoker, that he got, his inspiration from Vlad Dracul or Vlad the Impaler, which he did. Some of it did come from there, but so much about just, he was from Transylvania and he was kind of on the bloodthirsty side, although Vlad Dracul or Vlad Tepes never actually drank blood. He just, like murdering enemies in new and interesting ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but these guys like Bram Stoker and Sheridan Le Fanu, they had that source material right in front of them in their own native Ireland.
Well, interestingly enough, with Stoker, because there's a Bram Stoker piece. It's the chapter that was taken out of Dracula and then published as a separate story. Dracula's Guest is actually in the book, and I was looking up some stuff about him, and apparently most people think he really had never even heard of Vlad. There's like no indication that he had ever heard of him. He got the name Dracula because he thought it meant demon or something like that, which was wrong. He had a poor translation because it actually means dragon. But
right.
So he just came across that name accidentally, and they think, if anything, the story of Elizabeth Bathory he did know, and that might be more of an influence, which of course was a huge influence on the other one, what's it? I can never Sheridan Le Fanu. Yeah, it was obviously a big influence on him too.
Right, with Carmilla.
Right, but it's interesting because apparently there is no evidence, and even in his notes, he never mentions Vlad at all. It's like he didn't even know about him apparently, but everybody after the fact just assumed that he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's always been a controversial subject with historians, but yeah, I mean the source material that he had was there, and also hearing of Elizabeth Bathory, and people who don't know who Elizabeth Bathory is, there's debate on whether or not she actually drank blood, but she was a noblewoman from the area of the world where Vlad Dracul or Vlad Tepes was from, and she was known throughout the land as being this incredibly beautiful young woman.
Let me see if I can do this. I actually did a story on it in there. Let's see. There's a picture of her. If I can get it up, right? Yeah.
But She started to age, and she did, as with most nobility of that time, she had like a huge cruelty streak. And one day, while one of her servants was brushing her hair, she did it a little bit too hard, and Bathory punched her or slapped her. And when she did that, it got some of her blood on her hand. And Elizabeth Bathory, who was a little bit on the crazy side to begin with, kind of thought, "Oh wow, this servant's girl's blood. She's a virgin, and her virginal blood is making me look younger." So what does she do? She goes on a murderous rampage and brings all these young virginal women, which virgins were pretty easy to come by back then, and bathed in their blood. And she honestly believed that this was something that was making her younger. And one day she got found out, and the villagers and the law went to her house or went to her castle, manor house, whatever, and actually found bodies of young women littered around the house, drained of their blood. So because she was nobility, they couldn't exactly execute her, but what they did was they bricked her up in the room, and she died completely out of her freaking mind. So, it's these stories that are historical fact. We know that this happened. And even though that there is debate whether or not she drank the blood of these virginal women.
There's actually a debate about quite a bit about that, because I did the article and I researched it. Mm-hmm. Apparently, and it's just like with Vlad, the people who were her enemies were the ones who ultimately wrote the stories and told the stories about her. And she had one really important enemy, which was the king. And the reason he was her enemy was he owed her husband a lot of money, and he didn't want to pay it back. And so there's a theory that all these stories were manufactured to give the king a reason to take her assets and not pay back the money, which is possible. But I do know one thing. She was supposedly had epilepsy, and at the time, epilepsy, one of the things that they thought was a cure for epilepsy, or at least a treatment for it, was to either rub blood or brain tissue of dead people on your lips or actually swallow it. And so they think that maybe she did that because it was supposedly a remedy for epilepsy at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, the part I did not know. I did not know that she had something like epilepsy, but again, this is one of those things where it's like you have different stories that sort of come together, and it's like, well, what do you believe? What's the historical record? What is legend? What is myth? And I think that really kind of, is the vampire.
Right.
Or, it's like we have these real stories, we have these myths, they come together. It's kind of like, medieval urban legends.
Right. And that's anything, think about any story, that even recent stuff. Someone will tell you a story and there's some shred of fact in there usually. But
sure.
Sometimes their whole information, because it's gone through multiple people, it's like a game of telephone. Everybody has changed it a little bit. And by the time you get to the end, you can barely recognize the story. And these things were hundreds and hundreds of years ago. How do we really have any idea what actually happened?
Yeah, and the only people that it's not like normal people like you and I were literate.
No, most people, only certain people could write back then.
Yeah, so usually clergy or it was nobility.
Right. And other than that, those stories were just passed around verbally. And sometimes the stories were literally just passed around by word of mouth for a while and then eventually written down. God knows how much they changed,
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's like, hey, they're great stories. It's great folklore. It's something to keep you up at night. But if you like reading, stories of the macabre and the nightmarish, which hey, I do, and I know you do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the vampire is just one of those great stories.
Yeah, and what I told when I did my very first interview, when I launched Tales of Wonder and Dread, I told the guy, I said, you know what? It literally doesn't matter if these stories are true or not. They're just fun. Right. They're fun stories, whether you believe them or not. And sometimes even knowing the facts of it and what what truth there is and isn't is fun too. But now, do you actually have any belief in real vampires?
Um, no. Oh God. What's no, not like not like vampires. Um, you know, like Louis and Lestat, or Edward Cullen from those, you know, teen movies from a few years ago.
The sparkly boy?
Yeah, Sparkly Boy with the huge hair. Um, yeah, I really, or rather, oh, you know what? He is the recent Batman.
Yes.
Um, yeah, looking back on a lot of the historical record, the real vampire was not this, you know, really good-looking guy who wore fancy clothes, or a sexy buxom woman. It's those are not the real vampires of folklore. The real vampire of folklore is more like the Walking Dead than the Cullen family.
Right.
Yeah, it's you you hear of like these, they rise from the grave, and they really don't have any intelligence to them, and all they want to do is either um, cause chaos, or seek vengeance, or spread disease. Spreading disease, is one that figures in to every single um, vampiric folklore that has been out there, going back, as far as ancient Babylon. The Litu, or the Lamashtu, they were, they not only did they drink blood, but they also spread disease and chaos and destruction. The real vampire of folklore um, is more of a zombie than this beautiful stranger, I
Right.
guess you could. If I'm going to have any kind of a belief in vampires, that's where my belief is going to be. You know,
And
um,
if you think about it, the disease part makes perfect sense. You've got a bunch of people who have no knowledge of viruses, no knowledge of bacteria, and people
mhm,
get sick and it spreads among people. They have no idea what the mechanism for that is. So
right,
obviously, you'd have real terror at something that you think causes disease.
right. And but the thing that does make our Western idea of a vampire just sexy, and just kind of like, awesome, is, and I will admit, I love vampire books. Anne Rice. One of my favorite books is Lost Souls by Poppy Z. Bright. I've read that book several times. I have a signed copy by them, and I say them because Poppy is transgender. And what I think is so attractive about these, let's face it, us as human beings, we are filled daily with existential dread. Like, we are very much self-aware that one of these days we're going to die. Like, I will admit, I'm kind of envious of my dog laying at my feet right now,
I,
because she has no idea that one of these days, she's
yeah,
going to be pushing up daisies. But one of these days we are. And I myself faced death about 6 years ago, when I was diagnosed with synovial cell sarcoma, lost my leg and half of my left lung, and so we had this existential dread that makes, like, oh my God, we're going to die and it's going to be over. But that's one of the things that makes vampires so attractive, because there is a way to escape that existential dread. There is a way to escape dying. And
good old
why,
never die.
and I think that that's why a lot of people really love vampires in movies, and books, and in media, because it's an escape. It's an escape from what's going to get all of us, and that is, one of these days the Reaper is going to come for you, and there ain't nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and I think the whole attractive vampire thing, I think that probably all started with Dracula. I think
Yeah,
it certainly did in cinema because Nosferatu was certainly not like that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, if anything, Nosferatu is closer to the actual vampire.
Yeah, he was seriously creepy. I mean, definitely wouldn't be on somebody's sexiest list.
And it's one of my favorite movies, and the best version that I've ever seen of that movie is when the music of Typo Negative is used as the background music and as the
Oh,
soundtrack.
nice. I've not
Oh, yeah,
seen.
it's awesome. They're one of my all-time favorite bands. Peter Steele is a god to me, and their music is vampiric. Peter Steele is a very vampiric look to him. And so if you ever watch Nosferatu, look for it. You can find it on YouTube. Just type in Nosferatu, Typo Negative, and believe me, if you like gothic horror and gothic music, you will not be disappointed.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. Now,
Yeah.
out of curiosity, what are some of your favorite vampire movies?
Definitely Nosferatu. Love Nosferatu. Near Dark with Bill Paxton.
Yes,
Love
that
it.
I love that movie.
I know, and it's like it's one that nobody ever really talks about.
No, because
And
Lost Boys got all the attention.
yeah, exactly. Well, Lost Boys is another one, but Near Dark is they don't ever actually use the word vampire in the movie, but the idea is so heavily implied that it's like implied that it's like, yeah, Bill Paxton and Lance Hendrickson,
Yeah,
they're and I can't remember the actress's name, that they're just these nomadic vampires, and which that was a really great movie. Of course, Lost Boys. I'm a Gen Xer, so of course I'm gonna like Lost Boys. Interview with a Vampire. And I know this is going to be an extremely unpopular opinion, but man, I loved Queen of the Damned. And the soundtrack is probably one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard for a movie. But yeah, those are some of my my favorite vampire movies. Yeah.
nice. So I guess we should talk too. You have, and we've talked about it before, your regular podcast
Mhm.
that you do with Stephen Lancaster. But
Yes.
now you guys actually each have your own podcasts too. So why don't you talk about all three of those a little bit?
Well, as Stephen Lancaster, or as I like to say, Stephen Lancaster, known as the Ego, he yeah, it's so funny. Like he and I talk shit about each other so much on the show. We've actually got messages from people who are like, "Do you guys really even like each other?" It's like, he's he's I respect him so much, and he really is one of my best friends. Anyway, so a couple of years ago, Steven, he comes to me and he's like, I want to start a podcast and we're going to do it on YouTube, so it's going to be on video. I'm like, all right, cool. So what does that have to do with me? I had actually got into podcasting. I was the co-host of one of the very first paranormal podcasts, which was the Paranormal Underground Radio, which is paranormalunderground.net, which is an online magazine that I wrote for years and occasionally write for now. So Stephen comes to me and he's like, I want to start this thing and I want you to be a host. And I'm like, I don't do this anymore. I my experience within the past, things did not end well. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to think about it. And he's like, and I'm like, well, why are you asking me when you have like, all these other, really super talented people out there that you could talk to? The guy's been on television. He's done a couple episodes of haunting, and been on some other stuff. And he's like, well, to be honest with you, Rick, I can't find anything wrong with you. I'm like, hey, that's awesome. So my reputation precedes itself. I'm not one of these people that's out there to make a name for myself and be famous and whatever. So I'm like, you know what? All right, dude, let's do it. So we started out on YouTube. Our first season was done on YouTube, and then Steven is like, let's just do this as a podcast. Awesome. So we start doing Shadow Initiative Paranormal Talk now as a podcast, and you can find us on Spotify, you can find us on Apple, you can find us on Amazon. Basically, wherever you can find podcasting, there you can find us. So a couple of weeks ago, him and I are talking. Well, first off, it really took off as a podcast, and in fact, we are number 5 out of thousands of paranormal themed podcasts. We are number 5 on this list that was recently released.
And that is amazing, and I should congratulate you on that. I know I've congratulated you on social media, but
Thank you.
congratulations on that. That is a huge thing.
Yeah, top 5 out of we're number 5 out of top 15, and Stephen and I were both like, "What the? How does this happen?" Seriously, we were both truly amazed and taken back by this. We were like, "Okay, cool. People actually like us." And I think what the thing is like with us, what you see is what you get. We are not going to fill your heads full of a bunch of bullshit and act like we're, people that want to be famous and walking around like we're somebody. No, we're two incredibly accessible people who have been in this field for literally decades. I think between the two of us, there's probably 60 years of experience in investigation and research in this field. And because of this, Stephen and I were like, you know what? We want more. We want to do more. So a segment that I do on the show called Ghostwatch, which is actually based on a series that Peter Underwood did back in the early 80s for the BBC, where he went on and he, read about an investigation or someplace that he wrote about. He's actually a huge influence of mine, both as an investigator and as an author. Probably my greatest inspiration. So I got a hold of Adam Underwood through my publisher, Mandy Collins, with Bayou Lathris, and I got the official thumbs up from the Underwood estate to continue this work.
Nice.
So yeah, so now rather than doing Ghostwatch on the show, I do it as a separate podcast. And Stephen does his own thing now called Ghost Story. They both can be found at anchor.fm. That's where we record them. But Anchor is partnered with Spotify or owned by Spotify. So you can also find Ghostwatch and Ghost Story, which is done by my partner and super major pain in the ass, Stephen Lancaster, on Spotify. So it's like it's really taking off, and it's really surprising because of my experience that I had before. I didn't want to do this, but I'm tickled pink, as they used to say, that this is like taking off and becoming a really great thing. And I'm happy to be doing it with somebody like Stephen. It's like, like I said, he and I, we give each other a lot of shit and we talk a lot of shit about each other, but, we respect each other and we're brothers, love the guy. What can I say?
Well, I certainly don't know him as well as you do, but I think he's a pretty cool guy. My experience with him, he seems like a great guy.
Yeah, he's all right.
He probably says the same thing about you. You're all right.
I'm sure he does.
So now you mentioned too, we should talk about, you've got some of your own books out. Why don't you plug those a little bit?
Okay, so first off, my first book came out in 2014. It's called The Geek's Guide to the Strange and Unusual, Poltergeist, Ghosts, and Demons. Second book is called Behold, Shocking True Tales of Terror, ... and some other spooky stuff. My third book, being a lifelong citizen of the Chicagoland area, it's called Bullets, Booze, and Babes, The Haunted History of Chicago and Illinois. I'm sure many of your listeners will be like, oh yeah, we could tell that guy's from Chicago. But my fourth book is coming out next year, and it is called Ghostwatch. So it's like I'm doing like this whole media thing with this. I really want to to carry on the work of Peter Underwood, because I think that his work was very important.
Nice. There was something else that came to my mind that I wanted to ask you about, and now I just completely blanked. It's brilliant.
If there's one thing that I would like to talk about, it's something that that I like to talk about quite a bit. I like to be an advocate for the disabled. I myself, I'm an amputee. I'm my left leg a couple inches below the knee. I wear a prosthetic limb. So it's like I want to be an advocate for disabled people being involved in the paranormal, because I think that a lot of the television shows paint this as being like, real masculine, burly type dudes, walking around screaming and yelling at ghosts, and only to run away like,
Yeah.
little babies once a ghost decides to level up. But you know, it's like I always tell people, it's like this is for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter if you're able-bodied or disabled. This is for everybody because it affects everyone. And it's like I like to tell people that if you are deaf, I'm sorry, if you are blind, let's start with that. If you are blind or seeing impaired, chances are your hearing is greatly enhanced. I mean, that is a medical and physiological fact. If that's the case, you are ideal person to analyze EVPs because your hearing is more enhanced and sharper. If you're deaf and you're able to see, chances are your sight is enhanced as well, and you're able to maybe you're able to see things in pictures or things in videos that other people may miss. Or if mobility is a problem for you, like being an amputee, or if you're in a wheelchair, you're perfect to be that person that sits at the monitors and documents things that show up in video. You're perfect for that. See, this is something, like I've said before and I'll say again, this affects all of us. Death comes for all, and the afterlife applies to everyone. So if you want to get out there and you want to hunt ghosts and you think that your disability is going to keep you from doing that, that is not true. You can get out there. You can, look for the mysterious and the unexplained. Luckily I have this prosthetic leg, so I mean, I'm able to walk, and you really can't tell that I got a problem. I just kind of, when I wear pants or jeans or whatever, I just look like a guy with a limp. And believe me when I say this, I get a lot of the stink eye when I'm parking in a disabled spot and I'm wearing pants. People look at me like, "What's wrong with this guy? He's just got a limp." But the point of this is that this applies to you as well, and you have no matter what your disability is, you have every right in the world to get out there and look for it yourself.
Yeah, there's a place for everybody.
Place for everybody.
That's good. I like that. I remembered what else I was going to ask you, which was just if people want to find your stuff, where else should they look?
Stephen and I on the show, we like to really stress to people, we are very, very accessible people. You can come to us with anything. You could ask us any kind of questions. Don't get too personal. Obviously. What's happening? You can find me on Facebook. It's just Rick Hale, or you can go to my public page, which is Rick Hale, author and psychical researcher. My email is all one word, lowercase, Rick E. Hale 46 at outlook.com, or you can find me at paranormal lessons 101 at gmail.com. And listen to the show. It's people really seem to like this, and it really resonates with people because we're not going to bullshit you. We bring the truth to you. We are two guys who truly love this and are truly passionate about it, and really want to be real with people.
Yeah, and that's really kind of hard to find a lot of the time. It's like there are so many, especially on television, there are so many paranormal shows out there, and so many of them are such BS. It's like, I know you and I have discussed it about at least one of them, where it's like you'll see like one of those shows and you'll watch it and that's a pretty interesting clip. I can't easily debunk that. And then the next thing they're showing is something that it's like, oh dear God, how do they not see that that's just somebody faking this? It's really obvious, and they never called it out. It's just pure BS on so many of those shows.
Well, see, the thing is a lot of people will say, well, this is just for entertainment purposes only. I get that, but if you're going to present something as being truth, then present it as being truth.
Right.
Don't, throw bricks or there's one television show, and I don't really like mentioning people by name, but we all know him. He is
Yeah.
the son of darkness. And in one episode of the show, they show him on camera kicking the wall. And what was that? It's like, well, that's the ghost banging on the wall. It's like, you just kicked the wall, dude. So, yes, it's for entertainment purposes only, and it should be taken as that. And it's like, I've actually had people come to me and say, well, Rick, you're just jealous and you want to be on TV. It's like, I'll be honest with you. I never said I wouldn't be involved. I'm just not going to bullshit people on television and do something that, that it really isn't. Yeah, I do watch some paranormal TV shows, but only because I'm looking for guests and looking for ideas. But a lot of people treat it as being their end all be all of human existence, and it's just not.
Yeah, and the problem is the ones that BS all the time, they do a disservice to people like you, because to the average person who doesn't know you and doesn't know your show specifically, they lump them all in together, and they get the impression, you see enough of these and go, oh, come on, that's BS. You start to think all of them are. And that really does a disservice to people like you.
Well, and I think that and it's not just me or other people like me. It is the field of psychical research, paranormal investigation, ghost hunting, whatever it is you want to call it, parapsychology. It does a huge disservice, because then you have like the professional skeptics, or you have mainstream science who are like, because you have this TV personality over here, they're making stuff up. That means that we can't take any of this seriously. But really, what is the chief objective of science? Investigating and exploring the unknown and trying to find an answer. So it really does, when you got all these people who are faking things on television, or they don't know what they're talking about when they're on television shows, it does a disservice to the field as a whole, not just to Gary Hill or Rick Hale or Stephen Lancaster or any of my other friends and colleagues. It does a disservice to the field as a whole.
Yeah, that's very true. And you get everybody just tends to think that you're the same, and you're not. And the problem is, these shows, because of being on television, they have such a wide audience. They're seen by a lot more eyes, and so that gives them more clout and it give them more influence on what people's mindsets are.
Well, I actually had somebody once say to me that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not on television. I'm like, God. I'm like, did this person really just say this to me? And it's like, yeah, because they are convinced that if you have a television show or you're on TV, well, then that means that you know what you're talking about. That's not the case at all, because I've spoken to some, paranormal investigators who are on television. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And sorry for my language, but they don't. And but hey, man, they look good on camera, I guess. I'm starting to Wilford Brimley here or something. I don't know, but it's just a fact.
Yeah, I remember I saw one on there. This was funny. I don't remember which show it was, but I commented on it because I literally couldn't believe they did this. They had a guy who supposedly had gotten pulled over by a police officer when they were checking out some haunted spot. And I don't remember all the details, but I do remember the important details. He says this cop comes over to him, and he's like, I thought he was a perfectly normal cop, until he turns around to walk away, and I see a hole in the back of his head, and then he just disappears. So my thought is, has this guy never been pulled over? Because what I'd like to know is, any cop who pulls you over and goes to check on something is going to take your driver's license with him. That's what they always do. What happened to your driver's license? You never mentioned your driver's license. this story has a huge hole in it, and I'm not talking the one in the back of the guy's head.
Yeah. No, I know it's I don't want to spend too much time on Ooh, an Oriole. It's a pretty one. Sorry, I got distracted by an Oriole outside my window. I love birds. But it's kind of something my wife and I started doing when we were going through the pandemic. It's like just kind of watching the birds, and now I know why my cat thinks it's so cool. But yeah, it's I don't want to like bash television, but I got another funny story for you. I was involved in one of those threads a number of years ago on Facebook where it showed like the picture of four different famous paranormal investigators and that have been on TV. And the question was, if you had a chance to hunt to go on a ghost hunt with one of these famous paranormal investigators, who would you go with? So me, being ever the smartass that I am, everybody else is picking, oh, Zach Bagans. I want to go with the Warrens. I want to go with the Super Mario Brothers of the paranormal world. Jason Hawes, which he actually seems like kind of a cool guy. Jason Hawes.
Those two guys, actually, the original two guys from that show seemed like decent guys.
Yeah, or Grant Wilson. So I don't want to say too much. I actually think Jason Hawes is pretty cool. But so me being ever the smartass that I am, I said I wanted to hunt ghosts with Edmund Gurney, Frederick H.W. Myers, and Sir John Sidgwick. And I actually had somebody reply to me, I've never heard of them before. What TV show are they on? I'm like, holy shit, man. No, these are the founders of the Society for Psychical Research in London. And it's like, what TV show are they on? And that kind of led me down another little thing there. It's like, there is a serious lack of understanding of the history of why we do what we do. This goes back much farther than just, 2004 when, Jason and Grant first got on TV, or a couple of years earlier, across the pond over in England with Most Haunted. This goes back to at least the 1860s. Organized paranormal research and investigation, going back to at least the 1860s with the London Ghost Club, and 20 years later with the Society for Psychical Research. So we have these great men and women of the past who kind of told us how it's done. Gentlemen like them, or Harry Price, or Dr. Hans Holzer, or Peter Underwood, or Elliot O'Donnell. These are all, or Florence Cook. These are all, great men and women of the paranormal, and people really don't know where it is that we come from, or why it is that we do what we do. So that's another thing that Stephen and I really like to stress on the Shadow Initiative Paranormal Talk, is the history of organized psychical research and parapsychology. I think it's important for people to understand, that these are giants, and I had a really great opportunity to interview Guy Lyon Playfair, who was one of the investigators of the Enfield Poltergeist, and a couple of years before he passed, and it was when I was hosting Paranormal Underground, and it's like, this is a guy who really lived it, who goes back literally decades. It's like, these are the kind of people you want to impress. I don't give a shit about impressing Zach Bagans or any of the other people that are on TV. Those are the people that I want to impress. That is the crew that I want to roll with. And so it's like, newer people to this field, they really need to understand that this goes back much farther than just 2004.
And I think that to some degree is a big problem just in general in our society. Everybody's they're focused on what's on TV or what's in the movies, and they don't go back and see the history and how that whole thing came about either. Right. There's a rich history behind just about everything, and you do yourself an injustice if you're really into something, that if you don't go and look up some of that history and get an idea, because none of this stuff exists in a vacuum. It all comes from somewhere, you know. It didn't just sprout out of nowhere. And if you understand the history of how you got somewhere, it gives you a richer understanding of what you're seeing. And it also gives you, particularly in case of these shows, it gives you some sort of a gauge to decide, okay, what is plausible here, what's not, who is doing something respectfully, who's not. You know, you at least can have some way to sort of appreciate that better. So I think that, you know, that's sort of a thing about just about everything in our society. You know?
Right. Right. One of the things that, you know, you see on TV and that they use a lot is they use, you know, what's called trigger objects. And, you know, and everything with trigger objects, you know, it's something that's supposed to, you know, cause a spirit to, you know, like if it's like the ghost is a little girl, bring a doll, bring a bear, you know, a trigger object, something that brings out the activity. And people actually think that this is a new thing. And Harry Price was using trigger objects back in the 20s and 30s. Peter Underwood, if you read any of his books, he's always talking about, we brought a trigger object, and he was doing this back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So this is not anything new. This has been around for decades. And, you know, the people that really came up with these ideas, like Harry Price, what is that? Is that the dog or something?
No, it's my wife upstairs sneezing.
Oh, that's you, Miss Hill. Mrs. Hill, thank you.
Rick says, bless you. She said, thank you.
I heard her. Yes, like these are things that have been around for decades, and the people that really actually came up with it are the ones that they need to be given the credit for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, talk about the trigger object. I can remember myself just coming up with that on my own years ago when I was at a house that was supposed to be haunted, and by this old man that was supposed to have lived there. And I was like, oh, is there anything here that belonged to him? Well, that cane. So I'm like holding the cane down the stairs saying, hey, you want your cane? Come get it. I mean, that's a trigger object. It just makes sense, you know?
Yeah, you know, and these are things that have been used for decades. Or, you know, one of the things that I like to do is, before an investigation, I like to find out possibly what era a ghost is from. And, you know, it's like I'll research that era, and I'll bring up, you know, things that may have appeared in newspapers. Or if I can find music, I'll download the music to my phone and play that music. If it was, you know, like a ghost that was seen in, you know, like 1920s type of attire, then you want to play something from the jazz era. They're going to recognize that and know that, you know, especially if this is an intelligence that has survived the death of the body. I mean, if it's a stone tape theory kind of thing, or as people, you know, call it, residual haunting here in the United States, you know, they're really not going to care anyways. Like, you know, they're not going to give a shit. But you know, like an intelligent haunting, they're going to what's the word I'm looking for? They're going to look at, well, hey, this person knows what kind of music I liked, you know, and they're going to glob onto that, and, you know, and show themselves, you know, be a little bit more open-minded on their end of showing themselves to people. So yeah, it's just it's a lot of different things that have been around for a long time, and, you know, people are just now thinking that it's like, you know, oh, hey, this is new. It's not new. Nothing new.
Yeah, it's like I see so much of that too, like with the Marvel Comics cinematic universe. Everybody's like, they're just coming up with this idea. They're just throwing this stuff out there. It's like, you know, that was in the comic books in the 70s. You know, it's like you don't even read. All you're thinking of is, oh, this is what you've seen and what you've experienced. You don't know the history of it. You completely miss it.
Right. You know? So yeah, I mean, it's none of this is new. It's you know, they're just now showing it on television, whatever. But I mean, you know, when it comes to, you know, like paranormal TV shows, I don't really, you know, so much care for the ghost hunting variety, because it's all so boring and so formulaic. I really like the shows that are more docu-series based. I was a huge fan, even as a kid, I was a huge fan of In Search of, which was hosted by Mr. Spock, Leonard Nimoy himself. I
Right.
really liked that show, and I still do, and it's great because it's on YouTube. Or Sightings, or other shows that are more of a docu-series rather than the ghost hunting thing. Because I mean, how many more shows can you put out there where people are yelling at something that may or may not even be there?
Right. I sort of like the one with the Osbournes just because I think Ozzy and Sharon are hilarious in the way they react. And plus all they're showing is other people's clips and they're, sort of talking about them, which is kind of fun. But I
Well,
like that. And I like, the funny thing is most of those shows, like I noticed some of the networks will run them like all day on Saturday or something. And if you sit down and watch one, it's okay. But then when you start watching, like the Haunting, that show, if you start watching several of them, they're all pretty much the same. They change the place, they change the names, but it's all basically, it follows the same pattern.
Yeah. There is a show that that I'm kind of interested in. It's called Paranormal Captured on Camera, or Caught on Camera, or
Yes.
something like that. And they show like videos, and then they have, various experts, which I think is kind of funny because everybody in the paranormal field says that there's no such thing as experts in the paranormal. But as soon as they get on television, it's okay to call them an expert.
I love it.
So, but in the show, it's like everybody, these experts are. I do that a lot. I'm sorry. These experts, it's so obnoxious. But these experts, they're like, oh yeah, this video just blew my mind, and it was like the greatest thing I've ever seen, and this is definitely like real evidence of the paranormal. One time I want one of these so-called experts to be like, you know what? This video is completely full of shit. This person is faking. I cannot believe I'm even sitting this, taking the mic off, dropping it, and say, peace out.
Exactly. Because some of those are so obviously fake.
Yes. Like there was this one video I was watching where this guy claimed in the video that he was, he was like spontaneously possessed, and he, attacked his friend. And it's like, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? There's there's no way that this is even real. I'm not suggesting that possessions don't happen, because I do believe that there are real historical accounts of actual possession, and not just by demons, but by like spirit possession. You got a whole religion based off of it, voodoo. But yeah, and it's like I just one time I want to see that. I want to see like Brian Cano is one of the guys on the show, and he actually offers some real insightful stuff. He's not one of the, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. It's just like, no, he actually offers real insightful commentary about it. But if I would just love for him one time to say, this is full of shit, and I'm not even going to comment anymore on it.
Yeah. Now
Show them to me.
and there was one. Now I don't know if you've seen this one. If you watch that show a lot, there was one video on there that I found really, really compelling. Like the only way it was fake is if they literally faked it, and if they did a really good job on it. There was a girl who was at home alone, and I think she'd roomed with some people, and she heard some noises downstairs. So she went downstairs with her phone, and she's taking video while she's going downstairs, and she doesn't see anything down there, but she could hear steps coming up. And so she went in the room, closed. She had two doors to her room. She closed both of them, and got on her bed and was just sitting there with the camera like this. And she could hear like both doors were rattling at the same time, and they both burst open at the same time. It's like, okay, if you guys faked that, you had some really good timing to make sure you both got the same doors, because there's no way one person did that. It had to be two separate people in two different areas.
Oh yeah, yeah, Gary, don't get me. Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, dude. A lot of the videos on there are like, there is no possible way you could have faked that. I am willing to believe that evidence does constitute evidence of paranormal happening. I think a lot of those videos on there are great, but like most of the videos are like, come on, man, there's just, who are you trying to fool? Do you just want to get on TV or something? It's so obviously faked, but
And I think you and I have talked about it before. Part of the problem is you're trying to do a weekly or however often they come out with those episodes TV show with these videos, and there aren't going to be enough of them to fill up that much time week after week after week. You're going to have to start grabbing the stuff that's ridiculous,
Yeah, exactly. And that's cool. That's kind of something that I was, going to with, like, the ghost hunting shows. Is there stuff on there that's faked? Probably. But here's the thing. Nobody in their right mind is going to sit in front of the TV for 45 minutes and watch what we really do. I mean, one of the biggest misconceptions about paranormal investigation is that it's a scare a minute. It's freaking boring. Like I have sat in cold, dank basements with the spiders and the salamanders waiting for a ghost to show themselves. Sat in there for hours on end. Nothing. It is this is it's very, very boring. It's not a scare a minute. You're not going to have a ghost pop up and say boo every 5 seconds. That's just not how it works. And to be perfectly honest with you, when it comes to investigating hauntings, chances are you're going to have to go back to a place 3, 4, 5 multiple times before you even get something that's like, that's awesome. And that's just a fact.
Yeah. And then you get the stuff that it's like, okay, where did that come from? I didn't even see that coming. I think I talked with you about it when I was a guest on your show. Was the one instance when I was shooting video at a cemetery. And
I'm so sorry, but continue. I said, that's right. You were a guest on our show. I'm just so sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. But I remember I was shooting video at the cemetery, and I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get back home with it, and I'm just gonna edit the video. Basically, what I was doing was I was going through, because there were places where there were people talking because there were other visitors in the cemetery, and so I didn't want to get people's private conversations in there. So I was pulling the audio out of those clips and just using the video. And there was also a guy mowing the cemetery that day, and you catch that sometimes. So I didn't want that on there. And so I'm just listening to all the videos to see, okay, is this one okay to just leave the audio on? And I'm like scanning over this gravestone. It was like one of the groundstone ones. And all of a sudden you hear this woman, it was obviously a woman, go, and I just stopped. And my wife was sitting next to me, and she was like, what was that? I was like, I don't know. I played it back. There it was again. And it's like, there was no one there. But you could hear someone inhale and exhale loudly, and it sounded like a woman. And I had no idea I got anything. I wasn't intending to get anything. I had no idea I was getting anything.
Yeah. What's really, that is very cool. I was at Bachelor's Grove, and I actually caught an EVP of a man saying, let the mother effer feel the pain. I caught that EVP in Bachelor's Grove.
I want to go back to Bachelor's Grove so badly.
It's been, I think it's probably been 2 years since the last time I've been there. But here's the problem when you're out in the wild. It's in an area when it's very uncontrolled.
Yes.
I like to be in a very controlled environment when I'm investigating, which is why I've always done primarily private homes since 1991 was my first investigation. And that was of a private home. I was 17, and that's what I like to do, ever since. I mean, I do the occasional businesses, but I being in a very controlled environment, I think is, does more to show that, paranormal evidence is real. Being out there in like a graveyard or a cemetery or whatever, it's like that noise could be anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not doubting that you caught that. I'm not doubting
Right.
that, because I know you're a stand-up and solid dude. But it's like, when you're in an uncontrolled environment like that, it's, if I have any doubt in any kind of evidence, I'm throwing it out. Like,
Right.
I'm not even to show that to the world, because you just know that there's some, professional pseudo skeptic out there saying, yes, I'm going to rip apart your evidence. So it's, if it's like, if I have any doubt in that evidence, and if it's Snidely Whiplash, I know that you know what I'm talking about. If there's any kind of doubt in evidence, I'm just going to toss it.
Yeah, and that's a good way to get, be credible that way.
Yeah.
Any semblance of anything that could be misconstrued, you don't even mess with it. Well, and like you say, I know for sure that there was no one around me when I shot that video, but no one else knows that. No one else was there to know that. They could think, oh, there's somebody right there. There wasn't, but I can see absolutely what you mean.
Yeah. No, hey, like I said, I know you to be a solid guy, so I'm not gonna,
yeah,
doubt what you say.
I mean, it caught me so much by surprise when I heard that. I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I didn't hear it when I was there either. It wasn't like I heard it when I was recording it. It just showed up on the video.
Right. Yeah, no, I know. I get it. But yeah, that is, I would like to hear that. If you could send that to me, that'd be great.
Yeah, I've actually got it out there on YouTube. I can send you a link and you can see where it is.
Yeah.
Because I actually may have the actual video, this separate little clip too that I can send you. But yeah, so that's that thing. So was there anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I mean, wow, I think we really covered it all. I do have to get going though, because I got to leave soon.
First, I got to. So maybe we should wrap it up. Like I say, you given them your links, or you told them where to look for your stuff. You might want to give a quick refresher on that.
Yeah, sure. You can find the Shadow Initiative Paranormal Talk. You can, we do we record a new show. We'll try to record a new show every Sunday, and you can find it out there in any, kind of in podcasts websites, things like Amazon, Spotify, Apple. We are literally everywhere. And you can also find us too with Ghostwatch and Ghost Story at Anchor FM, as well as Spotify, and also we put our stuff on our Facebook pages as well, and in social media. You can find me at Rick Hale at Facebook. Real simple. I'm super accessible. If you want to send me a friend request and we can chat, just don't be weird. That's all I ask. And of course, my books. The Geek's Guide to the Strange and Unusual, Poltergeist, Ghosts, and Demons, Behold Shocking True Tales of Terror, and some other spooky stuff, and Bullets, Booze, and Babes, The Haunted Criminal History of Illinois and Chicago. Ghostwatch, the book, is going to be out in October, and God, I can't keep talking about myself like this. Yeah, but that's where you can find me. That's where you can find us. And hope to see you. And we also have a group page, and it is Welcome to the Initiative at Facebook, or facebook.com/Welcome to the Initiative. There you go. I didn't say it right, so you have my head. So yeah, that's where you can find us, and hope to hear from you. And I hope we gain some new listeners, because I think that people really like what they hear.
Very cool. Well, number 5. Maybe you can be number 4 next year.
I'm shooting for at least 3.5.
3.5. Hey, great. So then,
number 2.
Yeah. So we got Lifeblood 2. You can get the 2 stories that Rick was talking about here, plus a whole lot more. I think I've got 6 fiction stories and probably about the same number of nonfiction in there. And we've got a number of other people in there. And you can get that at lulu.com/spotlight/strange sound, Or if you go to GaryHillAuthor.com and look at the Tales of Wonder and Dread pages, you'll find it. That link you can get, you can read the Goodreads page for it. You can click the Lulu link, it'll take you to the paperback, and the hardcover takes you to the hardcover. So that's about it for this time, folks. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you, Rick, for being here. And
Thanks,
we'll
Gary.
see you around, buddy.
All
Take
right. Have a
care.
good one. All
You
right.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.